From Launch Complex 39 at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, this is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours, 59 minutes and counting. This is the 25th flight for Space Shuttle Columbia and the 90th mission of the Space Shuttle program since launches began in April 1981, 17 years ago. The primary objective of STS-90 is the Neurolab Life Sciences mission, which will focus on one of the most complex and least understood parts of the human body, the nervous system. The mission duration for STS-90 is planned to last as long as 16 days, 21 hours, and 48 minutes, which would have a landing at KSC occurring on May 4th. And we see our 7-member STS-90 flight crew having returned to the dining room for a snack. They've already had breakfast early this morning. Here's Payload Specialist number 1, Jay Buckey, along with MS-3 Dave Williams. And our pilot, Scott Altman. Our commander, Rick Searfoss. MS-2 from the Kennedy Space Center, Kay Heyer, our flight engineer for this mission. And MS-1, Rick Linehan, together with Payload Specialist number 2, Jim Pawelczyk. And after the crew has a snack, they'll head off for a weather briefing and the suit-up room, and then we'll head out to the launch pad for the 20-minute ride out in the crew astronaut van. And we'll be joining them again shortly in the astronaut suit-up room. And there is our mission cake with the STS-90 Neurolab Spacelab mission emblem on it, along with Space Shuttle Columbia. This is firing room 3 at the Launch Control Center, where all of the countdown activities have been going on since Monday morning at 2 a.m. And there's our commander, Rick Searfoss. Total of 557 hours in space for Rick. This is his third flight, having flown previously on STS-58 and STS-76. Our pilot, Scott Altman. Scott is a Navy test pilot, 3,400 hours in aircraft, high-performance aircraft. And mission specialist, Rick Linehan. He's our payload commander and our career astronaut veteran, or veterinarian rather, for the flight. Of course, particularly important with all the animals on board the Neurolab. And here's payload specialist number 1, Jay Buckey. Jay Buckey has MD in internal medicine. And mission specialist number 2, Kay Heyer, flight engineer for Columbia on STS-90, graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and engineer at the Kennedy Space Center. And standing up is payload specialist number 2, Jim Pawelczyk, doctor of physiology. And mission specialist number 3, David Williams, Canadian Space Agency astronaut, has a background as an emergency room physician, among other things. Here's our astronaut crew now leaving the suit-up, headed for the elevator to go out to the launch pad. About a 20-minute ride in the Astrovan. And as is frequently the case, KSC employees will be wishing them well as they head down the elevator and out to the van. And here they come. Dave Leesma, Director of Flight Crew Operations, also with them. And here we see now our mission commander, Rick Searfoss, being prepared to board Columbia. Rick Searfoss, of course, as the commander, will sit in the left front seat, and then next to him will be Scott Altman in the right front seat. Then going to the aft seats, Mission Specialist Dave Williams will sit in the right aft seat. Kay Heyer, flight engineer, will sit in the customary seat for that position, which is in the aft center seat. And here we see the shuttle training aircraft doing a low approach to the shuttle landing facility and passing his other information at the same time to Houston flight and to the firing room. At this time we are forecast go for KSC launch, and should there be a return to launch site, and also our overseas emergency site at Ben Guerir is also forecast go at this time.
And launch director NTD on 212. Go ahead, NTD. Launch team is ready to proceed. Okay, I copy. I'll conduct my poll at this time. Engineering director. Engineering is go. Director of Safety and Mission Assurance. Safety and Mission Assurance is go. Director of Payload Processing. Payloads are go. Tape weather. Roger, sir. We have no constraints for launch. And NSTS Ops Manager. MP is go. Okay, copy. And CDR, Launch Director on 212. Go ahead. Okay, Rick, looks like everything's coming together. We're going to chop down and get you out of here today. We're looking forward to seeing you back here in about 16 days.
Okay, thanks for everyone for all the support. We're ready to go this great science mission.
Copy that, and NTD Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yeah, we'll go to proceed with the countdown.
Copy that, thank you.
Okay, let's just go for orbiter access arm retract.
LTC, PLT, caution warning cleared, non-expected errors.
Very good. All crew members close and lock your visors. Initiate O2 flow. You got to go science mission and neuroscience.
That's in work, thanks.
Yeah, let's just go ET, LH2 pressurization. 20 seconds.
Firing chain is armed. Now pressure water system is activated. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7. Go from 8 engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia on a mission expanding our knowledge and understanding of the human system.
Roger, roll, Columbia.
Columbia enrolled, placing the shuttle in a heads-down wings level position for the half-minute ride to orbit. "25 seconds into the flight. Columbia 1 mile in altitude, 2 miles downrange. At the 5-second mark, Columbia's 3 liquid main engines now throttle back in a 3-step fashion to 67% rated performance that will dampen the stress on the shuttle's aero surfaces as it breaks through the sound barrier. Those 3 engines now beginning to throttle back to 104% rated performance, standing by for the throttle up call.
Columbia, you are go at throttle up.
Go and throttle up.
The throttle up call from spacecraft communicator Ken Rominger acknowledged aboard Columbia by Commander Rick Searfoss. He is joined on the flight deck by pilot Scott Olin, flight engineer Kay Heyer, and mission specialist Williams. Down on the middeck are payload commander Rick Linehan, along with payload specialists Jay Bucky and Kowalczyk. One minute, 40 seconds into the flight, Columbia already 15 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 18 miles in altitude, traveling at 2,300 miles per hour. 15 seconds away from solid rocket booster station, followed 10 seconds later by the ignition of Columbia's orbital maneuvering system engines. Booster officer report good solid rocket booster separation.
Houston, we're ready for MPS GH2 and ready.
And Columbia Scooter, you're a go for the GH2 and ready.
Roger, Houston, put that in work.
This is the KU antenna deploy. Sliding the KU antenna out, we didn't have means to downlink video like this.
And Columbia Houston, we're with you on the east. We have a go for spatial activation and a go for orbit ops.
Okay, we copy that, and we see the doors are open. Good config. Go for Spacelab Act. Go for orbit ops. This is initial Spacelab ingress using the left in-cone camera looking towards the tunnel that leads to the middeck of the orbiter. You see the hatch being opened there, and the first orbiter crew coming in, both Dave Williams and Rick Linehan in the Spacelab activation. They're both working their way through the checklist, making sure the lab is ready to be ready for science. This, of course, was flight day 1. Everything checked out fine, and we got started doing some good.
Now in view, Payload Commander Rick Linehan and Mission Specialist Dave Williams as they enter the Spacelab module, what will be the home of research for them for the next 16 days. As they conduct a series of 26 experiments studying the human nervous system, experiments that will involve studies of balance, hand-eye coordination, the effects of weightlessness on sleep, and changes in blood pressure in the cardiovascular system. The experiments in the Spacelab are an international experiments. Participating in this with NASA are the European Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, the German Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, and French Space Agency. This television live from Columbia's Spacelab module, the Neurolab module. This experiment work is underway inside the laboratory. This experiment involving payload specialist Jay Bucky tests the hand-eye coordination of crew members early on in the flight and the effects of weightlessness on hand-eye coordination. The device uses crew members wear a special glove that has light-emitting diodes at the fingertip and attempt to track light targets in the device. The movements of their hands as they track those light targets and attempt to grasp light targets periodically as part of the experiment are tracked and recorded for analysis.
And Spacelab, we're now with you on TVC2.
We copy.
This is Mission Control Houston, back with continuing coverage of the lab investigations of the S-90 mission. In the Spacelab module right now you can see in the yellow shirt payload specialist Jim Pawolk working with, in blue and white striped shirt, mission specialist Rick Linehan, the payload commander for this Neurolab mission. Those two crew members scheduled to be working with one of the autonomic reflex tests. This work going on as Columbia orbits 167 miles above the northern Atlantic Ocean, having just crossed over the northern portion of Florida on its 17th trip around the world and heading for the northern coast of Africa. This is Mission Control Houston. This television from Columbia is from the Spacelab module. This showing eye movements of astronaut Dave Williams. Williams is in a special facility in the laboratory, a rotating chair that can spin it up to 45 revolutions per minute. This is part of a study on the sense of orientation for astronauts and the effect of weightless on the sense of balance and orientation. Specifically how the eyes take over for the
function of the inner ear, performs here on how the eyes take over for that and allow astronauts to adapt to and up and down, maintain a sense of orientation, balance while in weightlessness. For this experiment, Williams is in the chair, and as it spins, he follows a series of preset eye movements, looking to the left, keeping his eyes closed a period of time, and wears a special headset that has cameras mounted in it to record his eye movements for scientists on the ground. The reaction of his eyes and the movements of his eyes while spinning in the chair, which provides an effect on the inner ear, are gauged as part of the experiment again. Designed to study the effects of weightlessness on the sense of balance.
This is Mission Control Houston. Again, we're looking at downlink television from the Spacelab module on this STS-90 Neurolab mission as Columbia orbits at an altitude of 120 miles over the northern portion of Africa on its 32nd trip around the world. The crew on board is working with a couple of different experiments and preparing to do some maintenance activities with the chambers that are holding the oyster toadfish for the balance experiments. Looking at how gravity sensors work in space and what changes occur. In this view, we can see both mission specialist Kay Heyer and pilot Scott Altman as they prepare to work with the air pump on chamber 3. We're looking now at mission specialist Dave Williams and payload specialist Jim Pawalczyk. Williams in full frame now. In the background is mission specialist Rick Lennon, the payload commander, who is working with the animal enclosure modules. Today's activities in the general purpose workstation will involve some mouse injection and dissection activities as part of an experiment led by principal investigator Dr. Richard Nowakowski of the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New York.
Spacelab for Kinolite.
Go ahead.
It looks like those procedures worked, or whatever, because the ball launcher unlocked at the start of hand switch acquisition, and Jim's performing his trials now.
That's a good copy, Rick. Glad to know.
This is Mission Control Houston as the Columbia passes overhead of Southern California. On this 35th orbit around the Earth, we're receiving downlink television pictures from the payload bay cameras. This is Mission Control Houston back with downlink television from on board the Shuttle Columbia. This view looking at the Spacelab module, the interior of that module, which is providing a shirt sleeve environment for the astronauts to continue their scientific research. On the left of this picture is payload specialist Jim Pawlczyk performing pulmonary function tests of his breathing and lung capacity, and the instrument also is able to measure the gas content of the breath he's exhaling. These are part of the sleep studies in which scientists are looking very carefully at the reasons why astronauts have difficulty sleeping on orbit, trying to pinpoint the causes of those and possibly look for ways to ameliorate that condition. This research, in addition, could prove very helpful to people on Earth who suffer from sleep disorders. Mission Specialist Dave Williams currently discussing the experiment activities with Pawlczyk. Both men are wearing their respiratory inductance plethysmograph suits, which are used to monitor respiration. There's also an activity monitor that can be seen on their wrists, which is used to record body movement. In another part of this experiment, while the crew members sleep, they wear a special headset, a mesh cap that monitors and records brain waves. This data on the brain waves, eye movements, respiration, heart rate, and oxygen concentration are all routed to a portable data recorder. The entire system has the capability similar to a fully equipped sleep laboratory here on Earth. And now we've switched to a view of the laptop computer screen that is showing the crew a look at the data from the rat experiments. These experiments being led by Principal Investigator Bruce McNaughton. They're addressing the basic question of how animals navigate on Earth. Doing this by taking a close look at the area of the brain that employs input from the inner ear, called the hippocampus. The hippocampus uses information on head movements and direction to determine the subject's location. The 4 rats are being put through a couple of different paces in this experiment. One involves the Escher staircase, a path along which the rats are asked to guide themselves. The difference is that they will return to the starting location after having made only 3 90-degree right turns. On Earth, rats could not run this track and would be required to make 4 of those 90-degree turns before they could return back to their starting place. McNaughton and his group are looking carefully at readings of the neurons in the hippocampus, the part of the brain that's concerned with spatial location, to see whether they indicate whether the rats recognize that they are back where they started. The success of this area of the brain's ability to rewire itself in the microgravity environment will be measured during this session of tests and another session of tests later in the day. Once again, receiving downlink television pictures from the Spacelab module as the astronauts on board continue their Neurolab investigations. In the picture now, from left to right, our mission specialist Kay Heyer. In the back, payload specialist Jay Bucky. And in the foreground, mission specialist Dave Williams. Williams is donning the virtual environment generator, a virtual reality headset that's being used in tests of how the astronauts use visual cues versus inner ear cues to determine how they're oriented while on orbit. Heyer is completing data takes with the pulmonary function test that is looking at how her breathing changes on orbit in relation to sleep studies. And behind them, Bucky is continuing work with the road experiments, preparing to put the third and fourth rats of the day through the Escher staircase behavior testing. This is Mission Control Houston. We are continuing to receive live downlink television pictures from the Neurolab module of the Space Shuttle Columbia as it orbits 166 miles over the North Atlantic. This is a continuation of one of the Vestibular team's tests, looking at the functioning of the inner ear by watching the movements of the eyes. This is an experiment that uses a rotating chair officially called the Visual and Vestibular Integration System. It's a centrifuge that was developed by the European Space Agency specifically for the Neurolab flight. This equipment is known as an off-axis rotator. Studies on the ground have shown that movements of the eyes accurately reflect what happens in the inner ear, that system that helps humans stay balanced. For example, while the body is spinning, the eyes naturally move in the opposite direction to the motion of the head of the body. When the eye reaches the extreme of its travel, in other words, moves to one corner of the eye or the other, quick corrective movements bring the eye back. Then the eye moves again opposite to the direction of rotation. On Neurolab, crew members are acting both as operators and subjects of this rotating chair, which is designed to stimulate the vestibular system with both spinning and tilting sensations. The view we recently had of this subject's eye is one being captured on infrared cameras, so that scientists can observe and capture the eye movements that accompany the spinning stimuli. With the associated headgear on, crew members can't see that they're rotating because of the displays that seal out light from the Spacelab module. Instead, their bodies must depend on the inner ear to sense motion. The ear is very good at sensing the beginning or the end of a rotation, but constant rotation produces the same sensation as sitting still. On this off-axis rotator, the constant rotation does stimulate the inner ear in the same way that tilting to one side in Earth's gravity would. So while rotating when seated in this trainer, the crew members experience not rotation, but a tilt. The investigators working on this, in particular Principal Investigator Bernie Cohen of the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, believe that the brain will interpret the information it receives differently from the inner ear. Any changes in how this inner ear balance system responds to the centrifuge movements will be reflected in the eye movements, according to their hypothesis. The rotating chair has the ability to spin in two different configurations, one with the subject's back down toward the floor of the Neurolab and the other with them in a seated position. After this STS-90 mission, results from all the tests will be compared with those from pre-flight tests and tests that are conducted after the mission ends. The results are are expected to provide space scientists an understanding of how the brain in space reinterprets data from the inner ear balance system. These may also have an Earth application in that they may help scientists design more effective rehabilitation procedures for patients who have severe inner ear diseases. Again, this is just one of 26 different experiments part of this Neurolab flight, a study of the human nervous system in space. A concerted effort to better understand the most complex but least understood part of the human body. The human nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, peripheral nerves, and sensory organs, and faces a lot of challenges when it moves into space. This is primarily because the nervous system also has to control blood pressure, maintain balance, coordinate movements, and regulate sleep, all areas that are affected by spaceflight.
Spacelab, we're complete with rotator ops.
Yeah, thanks for the great job, and also thanks for the great VVIS day. We have a wonderful received.
Great, we're glad to hear that. Have a great day.
This is Mission Control Houston. We can see a number of crew members now in the Spacelab module on board the Shuttle Columbia. Payload specialist Rick Linehan describing his experiences inside the rotating chair to payload specialist Jim Pawalczyk. Meanwhile, in the foreground of the picture, mission specialist Dave Williams floating, and in the gray shirt is payload specialist Jay Bucky. Crew members are wrapping up their work in the Spacelab Neurolab module now, preparing to begin a half a day of off-duty time. This is a routine feature on these long-duration space missions designed to keep the crew happy and working efficiently and effectively. This is a planned 16-day mission. We are continuing to receive downlink television pictures from the payload bay cameras aboard the shuttle. These cameras being controlled by the instrumentation and communications officers here in the Mission Control Center. Right now, Columbia is about to cross over the western coast of the United States. Right now, it appears to be a very clear day on the west coast of California. Shuttle crossing almost directly overhead of the San Francisco and Oakland area. This orbit track at an altitude of 162 miles also will take the shuttle over the Great Basin of Nevada. The Wasatch Range of mountains in Utah, as well as the Front Range of the Colorado Rockies.
Yep, so you can push it up in there. And push fairly quick. So here, click, good. Yep. Okay. Perfect.
Okay, this is the commander, Rick Searfoss, performing one of our autonomics experiments, measuring how the body controls blood pressure, heart respiration, and other functions, both looking at in 1G for a control environment and then here in 0G. He's wearing a device that measures his gaseous intake and outtake, as well as blood pressure instrumentation, and how he responds to various stimulus, such as the cold presser that he has his hand in right now. This is Dr. Dave Williams again, instrumented for a sleep study to measure how the brain responds while you're sleeping. It's actually a full clinical sleep lab in that headgear. There's Rick exercising. We use bands to help us work out, since without the force of gravity, there's not a lot of effort. This is Dr. Bucky, Jay Bucky, on the ergometer up on the flight deck, working out like a bicycle. And here comes Kay Hire through the Spacelab. One nice thing about having a Spacelab is when you're not doing experiments, there's a fair amount of room in the middle. And dinner time on the middeck. Williams and Jim Pawelczyk eating over on the side, kind of like you might expect if we were in the trainer back home. But up above, Jay Bucky eating in a position you certainly wouldn't be able to eat in back on 1G. And there's Jay instrumented up for sleep, getting into the sleep stations that we're using, so that each of the instrumented crewers can have a little bit of privacy to try and sleep during the time that they're being monitored. This is the last Spacelab mission, and this banner was signed by all the members of the Neurolab integration team. Our payload specialists Alex Dunlap and Chi Mukai. And this final shot out the Spacelab viewport closes our crew choice down. Thanks.
Continue to take these live images from Columbia's Spacelab as the STS-90 crew are getting into the science activities. In this view, payload specialist Jim Pawelczyk hooking up monitors to mission specialist Dave Williams. Williams will be involved in one of the autonomic nervous system experiments this morning. The autonomic nervous system, the part of the body that automatically controls blood pressure. As part of this experiment, will place the lower portion of his body in the lower body negative pressure unit. That's the large silver bag seen on the floor of the Spacelab in this view. That lower body negative pressure unit creates a slight negative pressure on the lower portion of Williams' body, which will simulate the same stress on his cardiovascular system that he would experience if he was actually standing on the ground.
Columbia, Houston, for the Spacelab, no need to respond. Scooter, I see you taking electron still photos there, and you'd asked about them. Let me just tell you, we've posted a bunch to the web, and they look really good. You're doing a great job on those, and we'll try and get you a more accurate feedback later.
The photography that pilot Scott Altman was seen doing in the Spacelab was using the electronic still camera, which allows those still images to be digitized and then sent down to the ground through the Rodent communications adapter, which allows software files to be transferred up to or down from the shuttle, and those electronic still images can then be posted on the shuttle homepage for internet users to be able to view. Other science activities that will be occurring in the flight today will be more work with the visual and vestibular integration system, the VVIS, that's the rotating chair experiment, where crew members are rotated about 45 RPM to stimulate the vestibular system.
Foxlab, welcome here. Did you get the data on?
Everything looks great. Very nice study.
Okay, good news.
The visuomotor coordination facility is a piece of hardware that is intended to help scientists understand how microgravity alters simple movements like grasping and pointing. Movements that on Earth require the coordination of the eyes and the hands with gravity. The sensory motor performance team is going to be assessing changes in the eye-hand coordination of the astronauts during the adaptation to microgravity. This facility was developed by the Canadian Space Agency and is of special interest to Mission Specialist Dave Williams, who is representing that agency as a NASA astronaut. The visuomotor coordination facility projects visual targets onto a screen. As the targets appear, the astronaut points at them as they move from place to place, grasps them as they change in size, and tracks them as they move in a circle. During the test, the astronauts wear a specially designed glove that allows precise tracking of the hand movements and response times. The glove is equipped with emitting diodes on the fingertips, and it provides a trail that VCF uses to produce a three-dimensional recording. This experiment will look at the motor skill of the astronaut subjects early, midway, and late in the mission. Some of the first data takes took place not long after the April 17 launch. This experiment could be important for the development of robots here on Earth. With further refinement such being used in this experiment could improve the capacity of robots to perform complex tasks and for humans to program robots.
These live images coming down of the Spacelab and the science activities on board. In this picture, in the blue shirt, payload specialist Jim Pawelczyk. He's working with payload commander Rick Linehan, who is in the lower portion of the picture. Linehan is what's known as the lower body negative pressure unit. That's a device that creates a slight pressure in the lower torso and puts a stress on the cardiovascular system similar to what people experience here on Earth. Pawelczyk and Lynn are conducting an activity associated with the autonomic research experiments that are being flown. The autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that automatically controls things as blood pressure, and the crew members on board Columbia are taking data on changes that occur in their blood pressure during space flight. In the middle of the Spacelab towards the back in this camera view is payload specialist Jay Bucky, who's involved with some of the dissection work that's being done on the flight. Today's activities are, in terms of dissection, are associated with some of the experiment being done for the mammalian development team's science efforts, where they are using rats to study critical periods in the development of the balance system. The particular experiment is looking at changes that occur in the vestibular receptors of the rats in different stages of growth.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're continuing to receive downlink television pictures from the Spacelab module on board the Shuttle Columbia as it orbits 161 miles above the northern Atlantic Ocean. Payload specialist Jay Buck continues to work with the Kennelite ball drop experiment. This looking at eye-hand coordination and whether or not the human nervous system can adapt to microgravity with simple tasks such as this. In the background, mission specialist Rick Linehan and payload specialist Jim Pawalczyk continue to work with the animal in a general purpose workstation. Pawalczyk in the runs with the Escher rodent experiment. This is a three-dimensional staircase that tests the ability of the rodent's nervous systems to adapt to microgravity. On Earth, the rodents would need to make 4 right turns to be able to get back to their starting points. That rodent experiment puts the rodents into a situation where in just 3 right-hand turns, they return to their starting points. Scientists are very interested in how the rats' nervous systems are able to adapt to these differing inputs that will have them looking at being right back where they were when their normal balance and spatial mapping systems inside their head tell them that they really shouldn't be there. Again, these experiments are part of a 26 experiment package that is looking at the intricacies of the human nervous system and at the effects of microgravity on developing nervous systems.
In this view from the Spacelab module, Payload Commander Rick Linehan in the foreground is working with an experiment that uses a Canadian Space Agency facility referred to as a VCF. It's the Visuo-Motor Coordination Facility to assess any changes in the eye-hand coordination that astronauts experience throughout their adaptation to the microgravity environment. Throughout the mission, the crew members will continue to work with this investigation. The data will be compared with pre-flight data and flight data, as well as a comparison of the data collected throughout the mission, early mission, mid-mission, and at the end of the mission to see if the astronauts' eye-hand coordination has changed at all. And is wearing a special glove as he works with this investigation, which has light-emitting diodes on the fingertips. Those light-emitting diodes provide essentially a trail that the facility uses to produce a three-dimensional recording as the astronaut is attempting to track targets that appear on a screen. He attempts to grab them, follow them from place to place, and track them as they move in a circle. And this investigation will help to document the performance and chronicle any changes in the adaptation of the nervous system as the astronaut proceeds through this planned 16-day-long mission. During the development of this VCF experiment, some new methods for programming the movements of robots were generated, and with further refinement, these particular techniques could improve the ability of robots to perform complex tasks.
Houston, Columbia.
Go ahead, Rick.
Well, we've got a few minutes to answer some internet questions.
Go ahead. Okay, I have a question here from Matthew Jagers, who's 13 from Owensboro, Kentucky. And he asks, is the atmosphere inside the space shuttle sterile, or does it have germs and bacteria that need to be removed continuously? Well, it certainly isn't sterile because we're not sterile. We have bacteria all over our bodies, and so that's in the shuttle as well. So there are bacteria inside the shuttle just like there would be in your house or any place else. We don't remove it continuously, but we do try to keep it clean. That is one of the key things that our commander stresses, is to make sure we keep the shuttle clean, because there's 7 of us up here and it's a pretty small space, and if we didn't clean up after ourselves all the time, it would start to get a little messy.
The next question is from Larry Wirch from Park City, Utah, who apparently is an amateur astronomer. I observed the close arrangement of Venus, Jupiter, and the Moon on Thursday. I was wondering, 1, did you see it? 2, do you have a magnifying observing device on board to observe with? 3, if so, is Venus's phase apparent? And 4, are Jupiter's moons visible to the naked eye? Yes, we did see. It was quite interesting to see how the Moon, Jupiter, and Venus lined up, and it was very obvious to us on some of our night passes. We carry binoculars on board, but actually what I found to be one of the best magnifying devices is one of the telephoto lenses on the cameras. We carry Nikon F4s, and we have a 400 millimeter lens that is on board, a very, very powerful lens. And using that lens, we were able to see at least one of Jupiter's moons. I couldn't tell Venus's phase. That was just a bit too difficult, though.
This is Mission Control Houston. This view again is in the Spacelab module in Columbia's payload bay, where most of the scientific activity for the Neurolab mission is being conducted. In the foreground, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Dave Williams, who is currently the operator for the investigation referred to as VIVIS, the Visual and Vestibular Integration System that is studying the correlation between eye movement and the balance mechanisms of the inner ear. The investigation uses this rotating chair, which was developed by the European Space Agency. And the astronaut sits inside the rotating chair and cannot have any visual cues as to the rotation or the tilt that he is experiencing during the ride in the tilting chair. And during the investigation, the researchers here on the ground track the eye movement of the astronaut throughout the phases of this spin in the rotating chair to understand better how the astronaut's neurovestibular or balance system is reacting to microgravity. The chair can be spun or tilted up to 45 revolutions per minute to essentially equal the force of Earth's gravity.
This is Mission Control Houston and the Spacelab module aboard Columbia. Payload Commander Rick Linehan in the foreground, monitoring the rotating chair experiment. In the rotating chairs that wheels around at a rate of about 40 revolutions per minute is Canadian Space Agency researcher Dave Williams. In the meantime, in the foreground, in the lower body negative pressure device, is Jay Bucky, the payload specialist, as he conducts the first of a series of experiments to test blood pressure control and blood flow in the body in the absence of gravity.
And we're starting out looking at Jim Pawelczyk getting instrumented for the autonomic protocol in the lower body negative pressure device. They're measuring his oxygen intake and autonomic system response to various stimulus, including inserting a small electrode needle into a nerve on his leg and measuring the nerve traffic up and down that controls his blood pressure. This is another one of the experiments called Kinelite, which is a catch. Dr. Jay Bucky is here, puts the ball into the launcher, and you can see his arm is instrumented both to monitor muscle activity, and then there are cameras that record all his movements so that we can tell when exactly his muscles are activated to do the task of catching a ball. This is looking at eye-hand coordination and how it varies between 1G and 0G to try and determine if we move our hands based on mental calculations of where the ball is going to be or early in response to our visual cues. The ball can be launched out of the launcher at 3 different speeds that are randomly selected, so the subject does not know what speed the ball is going to come down next. The other thing this shows is how busy the lab can get with activity going on in the back at the same time experiments going on in the front. This is Dave Williams, Canadian astronaut, working on the sleep PFT experiment, which is designed to measure how the body responds in both 0G and 1G to lung output, measuring the gases that are in the system and how they decay over time, his cardiac output. He's wearing a specially designed suit that can measure all those variables and downlink that information around at the same time. Now, we showed you before the rotator chair, and I'm going to show you a quick clip of that again, that's just to measure orthostatic variables, or how the inner ear responds to various stimuli. We hunt them on the chair like this on the ground, and now we're doing it in 0G. But what you haven't seen before is what it feels like to be in the chair. So we've given you a special rotator cam. Now when subjects actually in the chair, their eye movements are recorded, and they're actually not looking out. They're looking into a special visual set of scenes designed to measure eye movement and track that. And you can see after a session, typically subjects ready to get out but doesn't feel sick or upset stomach most of the time, had a great time in the chair. Of course, we do have to strap them in to make sure they don't try to get out while we're rotating. Meanwhile, the whole crew keeps busy doing Earth observations and using the pilot simulator, a little mini simulator that we can fly up here to keep our piloting skills sharp over the 16-day mission. Rick, the commander, has a stick that he's using that's interfaced with the computer, just like the orbiter flight control system, using the same control laws that are actually in the computer, and flying to this visual scene. He's practicing landing on runway at Kennedy Space Center right now. After each run, you can go to a screen and check the results, all your variables for touchdown speed, how hard we touched down, and distance down the runway. See, it's another perfect landing for Rick. Now the PLT, Scott Altman is flying his approach, practicing up just in case something happened to the commander and he had to take over. Now he goes to the results to see how well he did. Great landing.
This is Mission Control Houston at 12 days, 20 hours, 32 minutes mission elapsed time. On board, busily engaged in their science activities on this flight day 15 of the Neurolab mission, primarily involved with the work for the neuronal plasticity team, trying to understand how the adult nervous system adapts to the space environment. Today, the science crew on board is conducting the second and final of the in-flight dissections of the adult male rats on board. Additionally, today, the commander and pilot will be practicing their approach landing skills with the portable in-flight landing operations trainer pilot. That is a laptop computer with a joystick system that allows them to practice simulated landings. Currently, Commander Rick Searfoss is engaged in the maintenance procedure for replacing, or rather bypassing, a water filter. It's actually referred to as the urine solids filter on the wastewater system. That was scheduled for mid-afternoon, but it was decided to be prudent to move that up earlier in the day, and so Searfoss put that in place of his exercise period that was scheduled for this morning.
This is Mission Control Houston, and these views from Columbia's payload bay from an altitude of 157 miles as Columbia has just made landfall over Northern California in the general area of Eureka, California. On a that we'll see it pass over much of Northern California, the tip of Nevada, and then begin a southeasterly sweep that will see it cross just to the north and east of Florida as it makes landfall and passes back out to the Atlantic Ocean. This is Mission Control Houston. This view looking back at an orbital sunset as Columbia has just crossed the terminator, the line marking the difference between orbital daylight and orbital darkness. Columbia now over the South Atlantic Ocean at an altitude of 174 statute miles. This is Mission Control Houston, and once again this view is inside the Spacelab module where the science crew of astronauts is busy at work supporting the Neurolab investigations. In the center is Canadian Space Agency astronaut Dave Williams, who is busy at work with what's popularly called the ball catch experiment, an investigation that is looking at how the astronauts respond differently in a microgravity environment in terms of their motor skills when a ball is projected downward toward them from a spring-loaded mechanism. Williams has just reloaded the ball and it will very shortly be shot down at him. Instruments on his arm will gauge his responses as he attempts to capture the ball as it comes down. Very shortly, Payload Commander Rick Linehan will begin work on the pulmonary function test, that part of the overall sleep studies being conducted on board. He'll be wearing a specially instrumented suit to measure his muscle activity, chest contractions, and abdomen contractions as he participates in this investigation that will have him breathe a variety of gas, which will then be measured by a very sophisticated gas analyzer to see whether varying levels of oxygen or carbon dioxide in the astronaut's blood may affect their ability to sleep on orbit.
Hawk DS2 for Kinelite.
Go ahead, Kinelite.
Yeah, Alex, we just want to let you know that never did we admit defeat. We took the challenge and jumped in with both feet and flew right into the center aisle seat. Even more is cycling cleats, and the data we got just can't be beat. But we're now complete with Kinelite. For us, it was neat. It was really a treat. And for all of you, we hope it was sweet.
And can't compete with that, Jim. And we copy.
Very good. I have a message I would like to pass on to all the folks through the years that have supported at the Goldstone Deep Space Tracking Station in California. The crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia takes this opportunity to thank the people at the Goldstone Deep Space Tracking Station in California for over 30 years of support to human spaceflight. The Goldstone Tracking Station has provided communication support to NASA spacecraft dating back to the unmanned Apollo 4 mission in 1967 until the splashdown of Apollo 17 in 1972. Your station continued to support us at Houston during other manned projects such as Skylab and Apollo Soyuz. When Columbia landed at Edwards during STS-1, your station was instrumental in providing critical communication data to the Mission Control Center during the landing phase. For now, this will be your last mission in support of the Space Shuttle program. Goldstone has been providing spacecraft communications and TV support to the Mission Control Center for many years, and we know the program could not have been as successful as we were without your help. We look forward to your support again someday when humans venture to other planets.
Our best wishes to all of you in California, and keep up the great work you do on NASA's deep space missions.
This is Mission Control Houston. This view from Columbia's payload bay cameras, as Columbia is currently 159 miles over the surface of the continental United States, having just made landfall over the northern coast of California. It will travel generally toward the southeast, crossing much of central United States before it once again crosses back out over the eastern seaboard and heads out over the Atlantic Ocean.
Twin sonic booms heard in the vicinity of Kennedy Space Center as Columbia continues to make its approach to the runway. Commander Rick Searfoss now manually flying the vehicle. Searfoss now beginning to steer Columbia around the heading alignment cone. That's the imaginary circle that he will follow to line Columbia up for an approach to runway 33 at KSC. Altitude now 30,000 feet. Velocity 549 miles per hour. Time to touchdown now 2 minutes 50 seconds.
Columbia on at the 180.
Roger. Runways in sight, Houston.
Copy, Columbia, and you are on at the 90.
Roger.
2 minutes to touchdown, Columbia traveling 425 miles per hour. Landing gears armed. Landing gear down. Main gear touchdown. Drag chute deploy. Nose gear touchdown. Columbia now rolling out on runway 33 at the end of a 16-day, 6.3 million-mile journey. 7 astronauts on board, bringing home with them an extensive amount of data gathered on the human nervous system.
Copy.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful landing, Rick, and congratulations to you and your crew on a historic mission that elevated neuroscience research to record heights.
Okay, thank you, Cap.